Now, this relates to, another issue, right? There's this antitrust. I don't know if you're familiar with this. The Justice Department under Trump, the so-called free market president, is suing AT&T and Time Warner against to try to stop the merger of AT&T and Time Warner. This is a vertical integration. It's not forming a so-called monopoly because nothing Time Warner and AT&T do is actually overlapping. They're completely separate industries, right? Time Warner produces content. AT&T delivers the content. The worry here is that they will discriminate and give AT&T better terms on the content produced by Time Warner than they will give a competition. So what? Again, why is it the business of government to decide under what terms I do business with anybody else? It's none of their business. Now, I am a huge opponent, and this is what makes me radical even in free market circles. Huge opponent
2 minutes
of antitrust laws. I don't believe in antitrust laws. I believe in the market. I believe if you can attain a huge market position, good for you. I believe that if you can merge a number of companies together and create a big old company, good for you. And you know what? If you're too big, then you will fail. Not too big to fail. If you're too big, you will fail. There's economies of scale and there are diseconomies of scale. There are disadvantages to size. You don't have a right to not have competition or to have competing goods provided to you or to get stuff at a price that you deem reasonable. You don't have a right to any of these things. These are not rights. These are violations of rights. I could say a lot about antitrust laws because they're the worst laws on the books today. I mean, the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act are some of the worst violations of our liberties, of our freedoms ever invented. And the Justice Department is using these acts to go after a legitimate merger, a legitimate business decision. There's no fraud, there's no hiding, there's no deception, there's no stealing, there's no thievery, there's nothing wrong with this. Get your hands off of my business. This is all about rights. It's not about a deal. It's not about deal making, Donald Trump. Government is about protecting rights. Period.
10.
Keep your hands off of my business. All right. So, but let me. I want to finish on this because somebody on YouTube is making this comment. It's bad for consumers. I don't care. And the government shouldn't care. The government's job is not to protect consumers. The government has no business in consumer protection, except to protect you from fraud and force. Consumers have nothing to do with this. What about producers? Everybody who is a consumer is also a producer, or most of us are anyway, because we have to produce in order to consume. But it's not. It's irrelevant. Whether it's good or not for consumers is irrelevant. This is why I hate antitrust laws, because they set the consumers as some kind of utilitarian standard. Then we have to figure out what's good for consumers. How do we know what's good for consumers? Net neutrality does not benefit all consumers, because if there's less investment in bandwidth, then I will suffer if I have limited bandwidth today because they're not going to invest and I'm not going to get as good as bandwidth in the future. But that's not the point. It's not the point. You have no right to particular bandwidth. You have no right to get it at a particular price. You have no right to consume anything that you haven't produced yourself. And if you go out there and you buy stuff, it's completely up to the producer how much he sells it for and who he sells it for. And the idea that any of you or anybody at the FCC or any central planner knows what the future is going to be like, what the future is going to determine in terms of innovations and progress of what impact this law or that law will have is absurd. This is part of why government should just stay out of it, because you can't predict it. It's impossible to predict. They didn't predict the internet. It's not like the government set out to create the internet. They accidentally create the internet. You do not have the general welfare clause in the Constitution is not about what we today perceive as the general welfare. The general welfare clause was about protecting the individual rights of all Americans, not of some, not at the exclusion of some. It was about protecting everybody. And government needs to lay their hands off of any economic decision, any business decision, unless there's fraud involved, unless there's coercion somehow involved. And part of the reason is, other than it's not protecting rights, is that they can't predict the future. They don't know what markets will come up with. Yeah, there might be some bottleneck of the internet. And because of that bottleneck, some genius might come up with an intervention that changes everything as we know it. Who knows? It's not me to speculate. It's not the chairman of the FCC to speculate. You can speculate if you want, but at your own time, at your own dime, without a gun pointing at my head, telling me that in the general welfare we should do X and Y. I really wish that the founding fathers had not included a general welfare clause in the Constitution, because it's so open to misinterpretation. And anytime you talk about the public interest, the common good, the good of the nation, America's interest, you're opening yourselves up to a disaster. Yeah, Stewart has a great quote from Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt said, "The public be damned. I'm working for my shareholders." Now, of course, to work for your stockholders, you have to care about the public, because they're the consumers, and that's how you make money for your shareholders. But your primary is not consumers. But again, that's a businessman. The businessman could have said, I only care about consumers. I don't care. It's his voluntary decision. But the government, has no business. Government has no business. Now, people say, but everybody uses the internet. Yeah, everybody uses the internet. Everybody consumes healthcare. Everybody eats. Everybody sleeps. Maybe the government, we should have a sleep police dictating how I sleep, because everybody sleeps. The government, everybody has healthcare, so we should have a right to healthcare. Everybody needs an education and gets an education, so we have a right to education. No. Rights about freedoms of actions. You cannot have a right to my stuff. You cannot have a right to my money. You cannot have a right to my services. You cannot have a right to my time. All you have a right to is live your life as you see fit, free of coercion. That's it. And rights are there so that you can pursue the rational values necessary for your own success as a human being. Own success as a human being. You do not make decisions based on some fictitious, a made-up utility function about what's good for society. Because there is no such thing as society. All there are individuals. And therefore, all we do is protect the rights of individuals to live their life. We protect their freedoms and leave them alone. All right.